This is CNS 2003 Enterprise, Computer Network Enterprise. Chapter 3, we will cover DHCP. DHCP, which is Dynamic Host Configuration Protocol. So we will be covering these items here and in the lab. Okay. Deploy and configure DHCP service. Understand what is DHCP, how do we design a DHCP infrastructure, and how do we deploy it in the lab. We will do it. And using relay agent, we will cover the theory part. Okay. So what does it do, dynamic? I'm sure you have learned this, some of it in your hardware course and the network fundamentals. DHCP, it will automatically configure the IP address and other IP settings, if you want, on the network computers, okay, by assigning an IP address from a pool of IP addresses. We call it scope. And we will be doing this in the lab, okay? And then reclaiming them when they are no longer in use. Why we need it? Because it saves time. You don't have to configure IP address on each machine. You avoid duplication. You avoid errors. Okay, saves time, more efficient. So it prevents configuration errors. DHCP by itself has three components. You have the server application, the DHCP application running on the server. You have DHCP on the client, and you have the protocol between them. Very, very simple. Now, when we do DHCP, we have three types. We have dynamic allocation. So the IP address is assigned to the client from a scope, and this is what we will do in the lab. Okay? And it is given for a specific time, and we call it lease duration. By default, it is 8 days. 8 days. All right? And then we have automatic allocation. Here, it is assigned permanently. Assigned permanently to certain devices. Okay? Without defining the lease time. Then we have manual allocation. Here, the DHCP server permanently assigns a specific address to a specific computer in the network. It's called a reservation. You use manual allocated address for computers that must have the same IP address all the time. Okay? And if I have a computer that should have the same IP address always, I do this manual allocation. All right? Now, when you configure IP address on the DHCP, as you will see in the lab, we can also configure some extra information, which is subnet mask, the router or the gateway, the DNS server, the host name and domain name. And we will show you this in the lab, inshallah. So the DHCP has some messages, and it provides some parameters when you are negotiating and renewing the IP address. And here I have the computer. It's requesting IP address from the DHCP server. So to do this, there are some certain parameters we need to know. Requested IP address, IP lease time, server identifier. Here you need to specify the IP address of the server. Then you have the parameter request list, the message, if there is any error message. Here, this is very important, T1 and T2. T1, when 50% of the lease time finish, then this is called T1. When 87% of the lease time finishes, then it is called T2. When T1 happen, the IP address lease enters the renewing state. If the masks are renewing, we reach T2, then we are in rebinding state. خلاص, we need to find any other server to give me the IP address. You need to know that, please. T2 rebinding. Rebinding time, it's almost 87% of the lease time. Renewal, here it explains to you how it happens. So as I mentioned, when the client reaches T1 here, the client enters the renewal state and begin generating DHCP request, and they send it unicast to the DHCP server. If the server did not answer, and I reaches 87% of the time, alas, I will send now to all the DHCP servers. So أول كان unicast, I'm sending to that DHCP server. Now I will send broadcast to everyone. Otherwise, I will lose connection. So we call this broadcast. This is at T2, rebinding time. Okay? So this is the summary of the renewal state. Now, the DHCP message types, please read them. You need just to know, have an idea. What are the type of messages that DHCP exchange with each other? Okay. We have DHCP discover, DHCP offer, request, acknowledge. Okay. We have also decline if the client wants to reject the offered IP address. DHCP and AK used by the server to reject the client acceptance. Also DHCP release if the client wants to terminate the IP address. You can even try this command in your command prompt. IP release. You can release the IP address given to you. You have DHCP inform. Also, this is a type of message. So this is the lease negotiation. This is the flow chart of the renewal. This is what's explained here. But here they put it in a sort of flow chart. Okay. So please have a look at it. Just see if you have any question. This is what I explained to you when they do N1, T1, and T2. T1 is renew time. T2 is rebinding time. Okay. This is the renewal after we reach T1. Now let's come about very important topic. Now I am the network administrator. I want to design my DHCP infrastructure. Okay. Now DHCP server, by theory, it can support many thousands of clients, but practically it does not work like that, because then your network will not work. It will be very slow. It will not work. So you have to design your network. You have to design your infrastructure where you want to put your DHCP server. Okay. And virtually all enterprise networks require more than one DHCP server. DHCP relies on broadcast messages which have limitation. Broadcast meaning sent to everyone. And this is not good in the network, not good, because it will make your network busy. It will eat up your bandwidth. So you want to design your DHCP in a way so that it does not consume your bandwidth. Okay. So one way of doing it, we call it distributed DHCP. I will put DHCP in each segment of the network. We call this distributed. What are the advantages of distributed? You can see here. Your clients have ready access to their DHCP server. It's very close. And I put in each segment my DHCP server. I am happy. Everything is local. You do not have to worry about DHCP traffic because it's inside. What is the disadvantage? You have to install many DHCP servers, right? It will be more expensive and more work for the IT administrator. All right? I'll show you how it looks like the network later on. See distributed? I have one server here, DHCP. I have another DHCP server here. I have another DHCP server here. 3 DHCP servers. Everyone is happy. But it costs more. I have to install 3 DHCP servers. The second method is you have one DHCP server in the network. So we call it centralized. Okay. What are the advantages? Look at the advantages. First of all, it is reduced work for the administrator. Okay. The disadvantage is the server which is running the DHCP will be very busy, and your network will be, traffic will be a lot, because each messages are going to everyone, the DHCP messages. Okay. And so what is the best way? Very good. You have mix, hybrid, both centralized and distributed. Okay. Let me show you how it looks like the centralized. This is the centralized. The only thing with centralized, in order to work, first of all, how many DHCP server I have here? Only one. But I will put in each segment something called relay agent, DHCP relay agent. Maybe it's a software. So that it will, you have main office, and then you have in each segment a small branch, or like a bank. They have head office, and then they have, in some areas, they have just a small office, relay agent. It's not a branch, it's a small office, they call it. Okay. So as an IT administrator, I need to regulate my network traffic by following, these are the best practices, we call it. These are meaning that you need to put your DHCP server near your network. Common sense, right? Yeah. Yeah, it should be close عشان the traffic. Should be close to your network. Adjust the least duration if you can. Now your least duration, I told you by default it's 8 days. If I'm in a very secure place and no headaches and nobody is using the network, only local computers, then I can put the least time, instead of 8 days, maybe 20 days. Also make the least duration unlimited. Sometimes you can do that also. Now, to deploy the DHCP server, we will be doing this in the lab. Maybe our third lab will be DHCP, inshallah. So we will do that. You will need first to add the service. You need to add the role. Then you create the scope. These screenshots about how to create the scope. We'll be doing this in the lab. So, inshallah, don't worry about this. Just have a look at it, just to have an idea. So this is creating the scope. You start the start of the scope and the end of the scope, and your subnet mask. Then you put the exclusion, which numbers you want to exclude. Let's say I have created a scope from .1 to 100, but the first 5 IP addresses I really want to reserve them to some other computers. Then I will put them in the exclusion. Okay, give from these numbers, but keep for me the 5 numbers. From 1 to 5, keep it. I want to use it somewhere else. Okay. Now, then it will ask you, do you want to configure the other options, اللي هي the router, gateway, the DNS, DHCP? If you say yes, then you can configure them, which is better. This is best practice. And this is what we will do in the lab, inshallah. So you create your scope. Now, Windows DHCP server supports two kinds of options. We have scope options and we have server options. Okay. The server options is supplied to all DHCP clients of the server. The scope option, they are only to the DHCP clients from this scope. يعني أصغر بيكون أقل لأنه I can have more than one scope on the server. You know that, right? Yani you can have one scope for this network, another scope for another network. So to configure the options, we will go there. To create a reservation, reservation is manually allocated address. We said that it is used for computers whose IP address must remain the same, yani static. Like domain controllers, DNS servers, internet web server. طيب سؤال, someone might ask, if it's already reserved, why don't I do it outside DHCP? Just do it manually alone. So, very good. Since you are using DHCP, use your DHCP to manage everything. Correct? Very good. Here you create the reservation. You give the MAC address of the computer, by the way, for reservation. It will ask you for the MAC address. You see the third line? It's asking for the MAC address. How many bits is the MAC address? 48 bits. 48 hexadecimal numbers. Very good. Relay agent who are used for centralized أو بالhybrid. Okay. Many routers are capable of functioning as a DHCP relay agent. But if they cannot, you can configure Windows Server to function as a relay agent. Please read the summary and let me know if